Fight!
Hey everyone, welcome to Kick Punch. So excited to have you here with me today. This is our next project. I wanted to show you guys this concept that I've been working on. You've probably seen this gentleman's face around. His name is Casey Neistat. He is the father of the video blog and has a substantial following on YouTube. Just a really interesting guy. He just films his life as he roams the streets of New York on a skateboard, and I'm kind of obsessed with him right now, just watching his stuff. He's really, really good. So I wanted to make a little figurine, if you will, a 3D printable figurine with his likeness. And one of the reasons I chose this guy is, as you can see, he's got some very distinct features, I think, that will be relatively simple to acquire his likeness, just because he's a very unique looking individual. So before we jump into that though, I wanted to open up my channel page and encourage you guys all to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you'll receive notifications when the new videos go up. And I'm working pretty hard to try and kick out content, teaching people Zbrush, and specifically with more of like a 3D printing workflow within Zbrush. It's kind of the workflow that I prefer. I've been working in the film industry for a lot of years, but I love 3D printing and I love making models that we can send off to printers, and it's just, there's nothing like holding the model in your hand after you've worked on it in Zbrush. So the other thing I wanted to show you was my website. I do have a website called kickpunch.com where you can actually buy and download some of these 3D models that I've made. So like you can come over here and grab this, let's say this Minecraft Enderman, and it's a fully optimized 3D print ready supported file that you can just send off to your printer ready to go. So I have like resin suggestions and just kind of a step-by-step process over here once you download. So anyway, that's available as well, and I think we're ready to dive right in. So back to the concept. So this is our basic curriculum here. We have, we're going to block out our forms, we're going to do our pose and our clothing and our hair and all that fun stuff, and then our other props like the crown, the camera, the skateboard. And I'm not going to get crazy super detailed with these items. I just want to make them cool looking and proportionally interesting. And I'm going to try to keep this tutorial for absolute beginners too. So if you've never opened up ZBrush in your life, this tutorial is for you. So let's open it up and dive right in. So clicking on ZBrush here and waiting. Okay, so this is a typical vanilla ZBrush startup screen. I don't have any custom UI, any custom buttons, anything like that. I do have some hotkeys set, but that's about it. I wanted to keep it as vanilla as possible for the purposes of teaching ZBrush. And so this is most likely what you're going to see if you're using 2023.2.2. And what ZBrush is trying to do is give you something to start with here. So if you were to click on hide and just come over here and start like clicking on the screen, you'll see these weird cubes. And because ZBrush fancies itself both a 2D and a 3D software, and we're probably never going to use the 2D mode, so I'm just going to Control Z and undo this, and then we're going to come back over here and click on the Lightbox Tools, and that's going to bring back up that kind of menu that we had before. And we're going to start with a character, because if we go back, if we Alt-Tab over to our character, he's got basic human male proportions, so we're going to try to find a character to start with, so we don't have to start from scratch. And one of the ones I like to use is this Nick Z human male. So if I double click on this guy, it's going to load him up. I click hide to hide that menu, and then if I left click and drag right now, we're going to pull this cool looking guy up. And if I were to left click and drag again, it's just going to bring up more of these guys in some weird way, because ZBrush is still in its 2D mode. So I'm going to Control Z, undo, and then left click and drag. And then once I've left clicked and dragged my model out, I can hit T, and it starts to open up with this bracket and this profile, this interesting little profile view here, and it gives you this head, and that's an indication that you are now in 3D mode. So if I left click and drag anywhere on the screen, we can now rotate around in 3D. So again, that's just left clicking and dragging outside of the model, or the best way to rotate around is just to right click anywhere. So if you right click, that means you can have your mouse, your cursor over your model and not accidentally sculpt on your model. So just remember to right click and to rotate. That's the best way to do it. And then if I want to pan, you can hold Alt plus right click and then drag around, and then it'll pan. And if you would like to zoom, you can hold Alt plus right click. So you start your pan, and then as you're panning, let go of Alt and continue to drag back and forth or up and down, and you will zoom in and out. So that one's a little bit tricky, so take a few seconds to get used to that. So right click, Alt right click, Alt right click, and let go of Alt, continue to drag, and it's going to zoom in and out. And just rest assured that this is new navigation for any 3D artist coming from any other software. So we all have to just kind of go through the same process to figure the navigation in ZBrush out. It's just kind of a tricky thing, but you'll get the hang of it, and then you'll eventually just figure it out, and it'll be second nature, I should say. So this guy's super cool, right? So we're gonna just maintain this basic topology. And by topology, I mean if I hit Shift D on my keyboard, Shift plus D, and then hit Shift F, I can see the poly wireframe. So this is a good topology to work with. We like this. We're gonna use this, and it's gonna help us during the pose process. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna need this awesome Donald Trump hairdo, so we're gonna come over here, and over here, this is your tool palette. So if you click and drag, you can scroll up and down over here to the right of the words. So you can just scroll up and down, and it has all of these options. Just know that we're only going to be using a few of these. I know this is kind of daunting. There's a whole list of crazy things you can do. We're only going to be using a few of these. And we're going to start with the subtools. So you can think of subtools as kind of like geometric layers if you're like a Photoshop guru in a way. It's just a way of isolating different models that you can work on that are all kind of a collection of your tool itself. So for right now, the way I've activated the hair is I have Alt left click in the viewport on the hair. So if I Alt left click on the body, it'll switch to the body subtool. You can see now this is highlighted, and that's the active subtool. So if I Alt left click on the hair, it's going to switch back to the hair. You can click on Alt left click on the eye. Any subtool that you want that is a separate subtool, you can Alt left click in the viewport to get access to that. Or you can come over here and just click on the subtools and kind of go through the stack. This method I think is less effective. It's a little bit quicker to just use the viewport, Alt left click, and you're ready to rock. So let's get rid of this hair. So the first thing we're going to do is scroll down just a little bit, and we're just going to hit delete and click OK. We'll get rid of the hair. Don't need that. All right. The other thing we're not going to need is if you come over here to the skull, we can't really see the skull, which is a little bit tricky. It'd be nice to see. If we want to see that, you can hold Shift and then left click on the eye, and then Shift left click once more, and it'll hide everything else. So by holding Shift, you're activating or deactivating all of the subtools in the stack, and then just making that your active subtool will make it the only visible subtool. The other way you can do that is if you hit Shift left click and turn everything on, for example, you can come down here to solo mode. There's this little button called solo. Click on that, and it'll temporarily hide everything until you click solo again, and it'll bring it back. But I like to use solo mode a lot during my process, so I can just get everything else out of the way. So what we're going to do, we don't need the skull. We're just going to hit delete here. We'll leave the teeth in for now. We're probably not going to need it. We're not going to need those, but we'll leave them in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is make sure that, so what we want to have is, you can see that like when I mouse over here, there's also a red dot on the other opposite side, and that means that symmetrical modeling is turned on. So that means that we get to do, half the work essentially. So if I turn polyframe off by hitting Shift F and left click on the model, we'll start to kind of pop out those polygons a little bit. Okay, so we're going a little crazy. And this guy has something called dynamic subdivision level on, which drives me crazy. So we're going to come over here, and we're just going to hit divide to deactivate dynamic subdivision. So again, I went to the geometry dropdown, I hit Control D or clicked this button right here, divide, and then added a new subdivision level to our surface. Okay, so now we have more polygons that we can sculpt on. So now if we left click on the model, we see we have more resolution overall to work with. So that's all great. So I think the other thing I want to talk about is just our brushes. So right now, as you see over here on the left hand side, we have our basic brushes, and this is our standard brush that we have activated. So if I click and drag, it pops that out, and say I want to smooth that back. If I hold shift on my keyboard, my cursor will turn blue, and then I can smooth that back. So it's a very common process to push details a little bit too far and then smooth things back, okay, with holding shift. So get used to that workflow, because that's going to be very common. That's going to be something we're going to do regularly. So if we alt tab back to our concept and have another look, we have a large head and very stylized proportions. He's got a, a nice kind of athletic build. So we're going to try to achieve that, but also, like, this guy looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's too jacked, so we're going to try and subdue some of the muscle structure a little bit and just achieve those proportions. And the way we're going to do that is a mix of brushes and masking. So if I come over here to standard and I click on that button, it brings up all the glorious brushes that ZBrush has to offer by default. And again, don't panic. We're not going to use most of these. We're only probably going to use maybe 5 or 6 of these brushes. And some of my big hitters, just so you know, are like the snake hook brush down here, the move topological. I use, let's see, where's the H polish? And the way that you can find that brush easily is if you know the name of it, you can type in, H polish right here. You can type H on your keyboard and it'll isolate all the H brushes. And then you see there's an orange letter in the top left corner. If you push that, that's going to be the one that isolates it to that brush specifically. So let's try that again. So let's say I want my snake hook brush. I know it's called the snake hook brush, lucky me. But let's hit S on the keyboard, isolating all the S brushes. And then snake hook's next hotkey is the H key. So if I hit H and click OK, I am now on the snake hook brush. And the way I'm scaling my brush size in and out in the viewport is by holding S, not holding, just tapping S. It'll bring up your draw size, and then you can drag from left to right. The other way you can do that is you can come up here to draw size, and that's where it is in the UI itself. So I like to just use S, and I think that's the way to go. So now that I have my snake hook activated and my draw size, the correct size, I can start to push my proportions in a little bit. And one thing that I find is really valuable in ZBrush is when you're making large form adjustments to your models, you hit Shift D to drop down to your lowest subdivision levels. I find that that's always kind of the best way to make large form adjustments, because if you're trying to make those adjustments on super high poly counts, that can be problematic. It just doesn't push the polygons around like you'd like. So let's continue to Alt Tab back and forth to our concept. Obviously our head needs to grow probably 4 times the size that it is. And one thing that I'm doing too right now is I'm hitting P on my keyboard, and you can see there's a perspective difference there. The reason I do that is for symmetrical modeling, it can break things if you're not in the orthographic view, which is hitting P, this view here. So it gives you a nice flattened view of things, and so it's just easier, it's more accurate when we're working like symmetrically. But it's nice also to just see the perspective sometimes, because I think that it just looks better when you have perspective on, because that's how we see things in real life. Okay, so let's work on scaling his head up. And now I could come in here and go like this and just start to drag his head out like this and just get kind of crazy with it. But I think that's kind of the less effective way to do it. So I'm gonna Control Z and go back to where it was, and then I'm going to hold Control, and you'll notice this over here switches to what's called the mask pen. And now if I'm holding Control and I click and drag outside of the model, I drag this dark rectangle and let go, and now I've masked the geometry right there. And this is beneficial in a lot of ways. I can't affect that masked area. So if I want to protect that area, that detailing, that's one way to do it. And I can also use this masked area to sort of pose my character too. So it's almost like a rig, if you will, or like you're getting ready to animate or pose a character by painting skin weights. It's very similar to that workflow. So what I'm going to do is I don't want this sharp line. I want this to be blurred a little bit. So I'm going to control left click on the head, and it's going to blur that mask. Another way to do that, if I undo, is come over here to the masking drop down, and then I can just click on blur mask a bunch of times, and it'll blur that mask. And the problem here is I want to scale the head, not the body, right? So I'm going to control left click tap outside of the model, and it's going to invert my selection here. And now I want to scale that head up, okay? So one of the ways I can do that is by using these buttons up here. So if I click on scale, it's going to give me like a traditional transform gizmo, something that you'd see in Maya or Blender. And I want to move my pivot point to the right area. So one way you can do that is by clicking this, go to unmask center, and it'll snap that pivot up to where we need it to be. And then from here, I want to scale by clicking this the yellow square, and just clicking that and dragging that up. And the only problem is we noticed that our eyes did not scale with our model. And so if we undo this by hitting Control Z, turn the scale button back on, and the way to go back to brush mode, by the way, is you hit Q on your keyboard and you'll switch back to your brushes. And we want to be in the scale mode though. So if you click on this button over here, transpose all selected subtools. So if your subtools are all visible, meaning that little eye is on, it will scale all of the subtools that are visible now that I've clicked that little button. So now if I click on this yellow square and rotate it around, you'll see that the eyes, which are a weird material right now, kind of creepy looking, they scaled with the head. So let's Alt Tab back. We could probably even go a little bit bigger still with that head, probably twice the size even. Alright, cool. So it looks goofy, but we'll stay with that for now. Let's scale it down just a little bit. We'll come down just a little, right there. I think that's good. Okay, cool. So now what we're gonna do is I just hit Q to go back to my brush mode, and let's try to get some of the proportions in the face of our character that match our reference over here, our concept. Okay, so he's got this very distinct downturned nose, and his small mouth, his very jutted out kind of pointy chin, as you can see here. So let's frame this guy up. And one way that you can work with your concept is by alt tabbing back and forth, or ZBrush has a kind of an interesting little see-through option up here. You can drag this slider, and ZBrush is still the active software, but you can see your concept. I prefer to have it up on a separate monitor so that I can just see that way. But if you don't have that luxury, you can use the see-through option to see things, or just alt tab back and forth. So let's try to get the nose proportions all right. So remember, I'm using S to scale my brush size up and down, and then I'm on the snake hook brush right now, which is what I want. And again, to get that just come over here to brushes, and you can also hit B on your keyboard and it'll bring up the brushes, and then hit S for snake hook, and then H to activate that one brush. Okay, so let's try and get the nose proportions. So I've got, make sure you hit X on your keyboard to make sure that other dot is on the other side of your mesh, so your symmetrical modeling is on. I'm gonna make that nose more like downturned, and then come out this way. Over to his eyebrows, and it looks like his eyes are fairly like kind of let's see, where's our, right here, this is a good one, kind of sunken in a little bit, hiding behind these jutting out eyebrows. So Alt tab back, push that nose a good amount. And then he's got a very sharp kind of jawline, a nice angle there, so we'll try to get that. So Mouth goes up just a little. And again, I'm still just using the snake hook brush. Another interesting brush that you can use that I really like is called, if you come over here to your brushes, it's called the Move Topological brush. So M and then J, and that'll get you to Move Topological. And this is cool because let's say I want, even though I have my brush size scaled up and it looks like it would affect the top lip, it uses the topology of your geode to do the work, excuse me. So I can just grab this vert here and it'll move that lower, whatever I mouse over, more than, you know, like the upper, because it's using the topology of the actual character to drive what it influences. So I love this brush. I use this one all the time. So okay, just going back to my snake hook brush, and the way I am switching between my brushes quickly, you might be wondering, is I have those set to hotkeys on 1 through 8 on my keyboard. So what I do is I come over here to the brushes, right? I click on brush up here and click this little button on the top left corner, bring that up. And these are all the brushes that I've already used as kind of in my history since I've opened up this ZBrush session. And so what I can do is, since those are already activated, go through and just make sure you click all the brushes that you want so that it's over here. And then if I hold Control Alt, it'll bring up this prompt up here that says press any combination to assign a custom hotkey. And at that point you would just push 1 on your keyboard for the standard brush. And then Control Alt left click on the snake hook and then push 2 on your keyboard. And then Control Alt left click on the topological and then push 3 on your keyboard, and that'll add those to your different hotkeys across the top of your keyboard. So that's how I'm kind of switching between those more quickly, just so you know. And this guy's not even close, so we still got to keep cranking on him. I had the pinch brush. I'm going back to my snake hook brush, which I have it set to number 3 on my keyboard. Oops, I'm on clay buildup. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, I have that on my 4. Number 4 on my keyboard. So Alt tab back over, take a look at this guy. Okay. I want more resolution in this, so let's hit D on the keyboard because we've already subdivided. So what that's doing, just to clarify, because I've hit Control D, I've created a second subdivision level. If I hit Control D again, I'll make a third subdivision level. If I hit Shift D, it'll drop down to those lower subdivision levels. If I hit just D on the keyboard, it'll just step up those subdivision levels. But just remember, if you keep hitting Control D, you're going to keep creating subdivision levels, which can get super intense on your machine. So just keep that in mind. Cranking on this guy, get that jaw kind of jutted out a little bit more, and a little bit of an Adam's apple. Tab back. It looks like, you know, in this little area, the bridge of his nose, it's a little bit smaller. It's not so wide, so I'm going to scoot that in just a little. Again, we're doing kind of a caricature of this guy, so we want him to be stylized, things to be accentuated a little bit. I had a better profile. Let's see if we can find that profile right here. So this is like a perfect profile of this guy, so let's try and match that. So another thing I like to use is the Damien standard brush. This is a classic big hitter for me, and I have that set to 2 on my keyboard. If you come over here, it's just it's spelled out Damien standard. And one thing I like to do is turn down my intensity and hold Alt on that, and it brings out this line, this nice sharp little line. And I really like that stylization, so we're going to try to continue to maintain that. Pushing in these tendons a little bit with just left clicking at this point. I'm not holding Alt anymore. I'm just left clicking, letting those go in. And I'm going to kind of subdue these traps because he's not like an Olympic weightlifter. He's just a normal dude. So Damien Standard to carve in, using that a lot with my stylized characters. Okay. Going back to the snake hook, getting a little bit ADD right now. Welcome to my world. Trying to focus and get this thing done. I'm finding that I get significantly more ADD the older I get, so bear with me, stay with me. What kind of earlobes does this guy have? Does he have danglies, or does he have, okay, he's got dangly earlobes. And I mean, his ears are a good size, so let's try and stylize those a little bit too, push those a good amount. The other thing I forgot to mention with this character is he comes default with some layers, and we want to get rid of these layers. So if you scroll over to your subtool and scroll down to layers and click this guy, he's got a mouth open and an arms down layer, so we just want to bake all and get rid of those because those are going to hose us later if we don't. So a good brush is called the H polish. I have that set to 5 on my keyboard, and this is just, it like flattens things out real nicely. You know, he doesn't have very prominent cheek bones, but he does have, you know, his jawbone sticks out a good amount, so. We're not going to really focus on his eyes a ton, because he's going to have these big, bulky glasses on. So I'm using the Damien Standard, holding Alt, and coming out with these eyebrows, kind of really popping those out a little bit, sharpening those. Pushing in the temples just a little bit. Let's zoom out and get some other reference here. His forehead shape. Looks like his forehead maybe comes out like kind of more like, let's do some drawing. Kind of like this. Whoops. Where is my drawing going? Oh, okay, I was just looking in there. So then, yeah, so it goes out sort of like this way. And then he's got these very interesting wrinkles, you know, right here. Again, that downturned nose and a little mouth. So just pulling out the, what's the word? The hallmarks of this guy's face. The landmarks, hallmarks. That's the cheesy TV channel. All over the place. Okay, so let's adjust the top of his head, kind of flatten that a little bit and come out. Back of his forehead. Maybe just too much, a little. Coming down. So again, just using the snake hook and then scaling up the draw size a good amount. Probably accentuated the jaw just a little too much, a little too hero looking. And another fun brush is the inflate brush. We can kind of just inflate that outer ridge of that ear. Going back to Damien Standard to push that in, scaling down my draw size. Okay, so let's start doing broad strokes. We got a little bit hyper focused on the head and the face there, but I think it's looking closer to his proportions. He's still too jacked, so I'm going to hit Shift D, step down my subdivision levels, and start to come in here and just like smooth some of these details out, so he's not so huge. I mean, he's a pretty fit guy, but this is just over the top. Okay, so smoothing these things out. That's ideal. I think I made his legs. Let's see. Let's take a look at the concept. His legs, you know, proportionally, his legs are smaller. His His head's probably still quite a bit bigger. So let's come back in here. Let's make the head bigger. So if I hold Control, turn on my mask pen, in this situation I'm going to click on this guy, and you have all these other mask options which are pretty sweet. So this mask lasso is the one we're going to grab. And now if I holding Control and left click and drag, I can drag a lasso around his head, and then again Control left click tap to blur that mask, and then Control left click tap outside of the geometry to invert that mask. And let's scale this head up again. And it looks like our pivot's maintained, so we don't have to reset that. So Alt tab back real quick. I think we're in pretty close. We're pretty close to the right proportions now. So hitting Q to go back to my brush mode. Going up my subdivision levels, hitting D on the keyboard to go up. And I'm gonna just refine his chin a little bit. This is me being ADD again. Classic ADD Tyson. You can imagine what it's like living my life. All this ADD just oozing. But trying to get these wrinkles, you know, like these landmarked things that we're trying to get. You know, and his neck is really not this long, so let's hit Shift D and then remask again, and then blur our mask. And we will drop his head down just a little bit. We're starting to see like his mouth bag coming in. If I hit Shift F on my keyboard, you'll see I have these different colors, and this is a way of easily isolating these different chunks of your model to work with. If I hit Control Shift and left click on one of the vertices of the mouth bag right here, it's going to just hide everything else and just bring that mouth bag into view. And now I can actually just scale up my draw size by hitting S, switch to my snake hook brush, and then move that out of the way. And then if I hit Control Shift left click outside of my geometry, I'll bring everything back, and we're good to go. So we've got that out of the way. I'm going to stylize his neck proportions just a little bit, make him less bulky, smooth those out just a little bit. Shift F to turn off my polyframe, go back to the Damien standard, and just carve his neck down just a little bit. Okay, cool. And now, very important, let's save our subtool. So if we come up here to the tool palette, you can go over here to Save As and choose your project where you're supposed to be at. And I like to make, you know, a Z folder just for Z. And it wants to name it the name of your top subtool, which is Nick Z Human Male Average, but we're going to change that to Neistat 001. Hit Enter, and now that's saved. And from here now, you can just either hit Save, or you can click Save Next, and it'll version up that file for you. So just remember to be saving consistently, constantly, because ZBrush will crash like any other software. It will crash on you. I'm going to Alt-Tab back over to kind of get my bearings, and then continue to maybe push the proportions in the legs. Tab. So right now the legs are not quite there. One thing you can do is you can come over here to Inflate, scale up your brush size, and then hold Alt, and it'll deflate your proportions just a little bit, so they're not so realistic. And scaling my draw size down and just smoothing so the legs are not so ripped. And smoothing out those pelvic hip flexors. Cool, okay. Alright, hitting D on the keyboard to step up our subdivision levels. Let's refine his neck area just a little bit. I'm just using the Damien standard and holding Alt to pop out those details, and just working on the Adam's apple area just a little bit. So, one thing you can do is as you're holding shift to smooth, as you're left clicking and holding, you can let go of shift, that it'll use kind of a different algorithm to smooth. It'll use kind of like a backup brush. So that's helpful sometimes when the smooth isn't doing quite what you want it to be doing. So again, I'm using the Damien standard and just kind of carving in this nice little line here. Just continuing to like stylize his jaw area, and then using H polish to flatten out these details. Okay, so looking interesting here. Kind of a weird looking dude. Working on some of the anatomy, just pushing this stuff in just a little bit. And we're going to have clothing on this, so it's not super important that we're really pushing our anatomy. But it's beneficial to have that as a starting point, you know, proper anatomy. Using snake hook again with a large size to push my proportions. It's very hunchy. His back is probably, you know, too meaty, too muscular, so I'm gonna bring that in. His arms too. Okay. I'm gonna click save. Okay, let's give his hair a shot. So one thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do what's called a mesh extract. So if I hold Control again, it'll switch to my mask lasso. And again, my body geo is the active subtool right now. So if I Control and then left click and drag my lasso right here, like this, I can create a hair mask. Okay, and then from there, what I'm going to do is come over to Subtool and scroll down to the bottom of the Subtool in the Subtool drop down, that is, and go click on Extract and then click on Extract. And what that did is it extracted out geo from that masked area. But if I rotate around, I lose that. So if I extract again and click Accept, what that does is it made a second subtool with just that hair in that. So it's no longer a part of our body geo anymore. It's its own active subtool. I'm going to smooth that out just with a large, broad, smooth brush using snake hook. I'm going to continue to refine this guy and kind of get the hairline looking right. I'll tab over, continue to see what kind of hairline this guy's got. Okay, he's got a little bit of sideburn, come down, and then it juts over very straight along the widow's peak area. So we'll try and achieve that. Come down lower. Okay, and one thing to note too, if I hit Shift F on the keyboard, it's got a semi-clean polyframe. What I want to do is come over here to Geometry, and I wanted to introduce you to Dynamesh. I click on Dynamesh, and then I click on this big button right here, Dynamesh button. You'll see what it does to my geo, and it basically averages the faces throughout the geo, so I have faces to work with. An easier way to show that, I'm going to Control Z that, and then up my resolution to like 400, and then re-Dynamesh. And I'm going to undo that real quick. Just a better way to show you what it's doing is I'm going to take the snake hook brush, okay? I'm going to pull some of the hair out. And you'll see what it does is it stretches those polygons in an ugly way. So right now, if I try to sculpt on these, they're not workable because there's not enough polygons there. However, if I undo that, try it again, pull it out, and then hit turn up my resolution to 400 and hit Dynamesh, you'll see it allocated polygons to that now. So I can actually work with this. So this is a very common workflow in ZBrush, something to get used to for sure. We don't want horns on this guy. I just wanted to demonstrate kind of what that was doing. One thing I like to use is clay buildup as my sculpting brush when I'm doing hair, and then just kind of come along and just kind of follow the way the hair goes. So I think he keeps it very short on the sides and then very long on the top. So I'm going to try to achieve that, just pulling that hair back, and then he has kind of this interesting kind of bushy ponytail in the very back. So I turned off symmetry to do some of that because you don't want symmetry on when you're doing all of your modeling, okay? You want to try, when you start to get towards the middle of your character, you want to get some asymmetry in there, and it helps with the visual appeal, especially with hair. So right now symmetry is on. Again, it was X to turn that on and off. So he's got these hairs that kind of go up and down on the sides of his head, and then he's got these hairs that kind of come along the top like this. And the way that you reallocate polygons where you need, when you start to get this stretchiness, is you just control left click your mask out and then let go, and it'll, let's turn it to the mask pen brush. That's interesting. Didn't really do it. So if I were to do that right there and then control left click and drag, what is going on with this guy? Oh, Dynamesh isn't on for whatever reason. Sometimes that'll turn off just based on different operations that you're using, so make sure Dynamesh is on and active, and that it is set to 300, 400. And then, yeah, I accidentally switched back to the other topology. So let's switch it all the way up to 900, and it's going to give us the polygons we need. So as we pull this hair out to do interesting things, control left click and drag, and it'll reallocate polygons to those stretchy areas. Another fun way to do this is to use the Sculptors Pro button. So if you click on this button right here, and then you're still using the snake hook brush, if you scale that up, as you pull that out, it'll start to give you polygons to work with, which is really, really helpful in some ways. It doesn't work very well with some brushes, but in this case, it could totally work. So it's just another tool at your disposal. Let's Alt-Tab back over and see what we got. So he, like I said, he bunches up his hair in the back, so we're going to try to achieve that. I'm going to use the clay buildup brush to get that. Just kind of got his bun. And again, I have Sculptors Pro mode on, so it's creating polygons dynamically as I'm sculpting, which is pretty rad. And that is largely dependent on the size of your brush. So if I scale up my brush size, it's going to give me bigger polygons. If I scale it down, it's going to give me more dense polygons. Okay, Alt-Tab, take a look at how we're doing. Let's continue to refine the hair. I'm going to up the resolution to, let's say, 1500, and then right click and drag. And now I've got more polygons here. Using the clay buildup still. Actually, I'm going to switch to the Damian standard and turn off my symmetry so I can get some interesting asymmetrical kind of vibes going. So I'm just left clicking using the Damian standard and swiping back, and my setup is I'm using a Cintiq. I prefer that. I think that is the only way to do this ZBrushing stuff. I know it's really expensive. You can use a Wacom tablet too, and that works. I prefer the Cintiq. So holding Alt to pop the hair out, and just turning back on my symmetry as I get to the sides of the hair, so I don't have to do twice the amount of work, because you're never going to see these hairs together on the same screen. You'll never say, oh, he had symmetrical modeling on right there. So just thinking smart about your workflow and ways to minimize the amount of work. I mean, we all have lives, right? We got families, we got kids, we got dogs. A lot of people have dogs now. So there's no time to waste. Life is short. Let's make it effective. Okay, so I'm going to come along this edge, and then where his hair kind of pulls into this bun, I'm going to tighten that up. I'm going to turn off Sculptors Pro. Sometimes it borks what I'm trying to achieve, and then re-Dynamesh stuff. And then be thinking too, down the road, when I'm printing this at scale, in tiny scale, are these details going to show up, you know? So sometimes you have to really emphasize your detail work to make sure that those are going to show up at scale. When this guy's printed at 6 inches or whatever, it's just not realistic to sit there and worry about, you know, hair fibers and things if it's not going to show up. So we got these curly kind of hairs. These are going to be tricky to get. Let's switch back to our clay buildup. Let's alt tab and get some more reference here. So he's got real curly hairs. And maybe there's a brush that we could try to find to get that. Yeah, it's going to be hard to sculpt these, so I might have to find a custom brush that will do some squiggly, curly hairs of some kind. If we can't get this to work. Yeah. He's getting real sloppy right here. That's fine. I think overall this is a pretty good start. Let's jump into these weird looking eyes. So I alt left clicked on the eyes, and what they've done here is they've painted a material on these eyes, so we're gonna undo that and just come over here. If we turn off our Z add button so it's no longer orange, and turn on the M button over here next to the RGB, and then if I just click on those eyes, it's now painting this startup material into those eyes. It's embedding those in the geo, so now we don't have that weird shiny looking eyes. And I'm gonna scale those up to stylize just a little. So turn off transpose all subtools so it's only the one, and then recenter our pivot clicking this guy, and I'm gonna scale those eyes up just a little bit. In fact, you know what? I think I'm just gonna delete these guys. Let's delete those. Come back here to our eyeball subtool, and then repaint those using the standard brush with the M turned on. Just gonna paint those. It's interesting. Okay, and then we're gonna recenter our pivot and scale these guys up just a little bit. Okay. And it's okay if they come outside of the skin, because we're gonna push the skin back out around those eyes. So alt left click back to your body geo, switching back to the snake hook brush. I'm just going to pull these guys out to fit those back in there a little bit. And let's take a look at how his eyes are in our reference. Okay, so, oops. Gosh. Yeah, I really need to straight on, but this is gonna, okay. So he's got these kind of baggy eyes underneath. I feel this pain, I'm getting there myself with the baggy eyes, looking a little bit older. So using the Damien standard right here to sort of carve in and then pop out that bottom eye ridge. I'm gonna go back to my H polish, and I wanna fill this gap, right? So I'm gonna scale my draw size down and hold alt left click and increase my intensity of my brush, and then pull that ridge out so that his eye bag kind of pops out a little bit more. Okay, yeah, it's looking better. All right, let's go back to the Damien standard and carve out the upper eyelid now. And pull that guy out. And carve it in up top. His upper eyelids are really sunken in a good amount, so I'm gonna drop his eyebrow. He looks more kind of determined and less worried. And you remember I still have the mask on his head, so let's unmask by control left clicking and dragging outside of our geometry. And cool, it's looking good. All right, so his body, everything obviously needs a lot of work still, but I think I'm gonna call the video right now, and then in the next video I'll continue to push the proportions. We'll jump into getting some of his clothing, and then in fact we'll probably pose him and then add his clothing after the pose. I think that'd be the easier workflow. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what types of characters or types of whatever props or anything that you would like to make. I'm interested to know what you guys think and what things you'd like to learn. And so we're going to try to cover a lot of the the full gamut of ZBrush using ZModeler and Dynamesh and a clean workflow, and also going into a Dynamesh workflow and specifically for 3D printing. But I'll try to cover as much as I can, but just let me know what you guys want to learn. And I hope everything's going great for you. And again, just leave a comment and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.